one of the things we really want to measure is impact, and a lot of that has to do with quality of the research that someone does. And a lot of these alternative metrics measure attention. So we sort of have to ask, well, how does that translate into measures of quality? And the first question I want to ask is, well, how well are we actually measuring attention? There was a study done by a company called Chartbeat, who do real-time data to big web publications, and they looked at 2 billion visits across the web over the course of a month. They said page views are pretty much meaningless. 55% of times a reader spends less than 15 seconds on a given web page. Then they said there's no correlation between someone sharing an article by social media and that person having read the article. And articles with more shares don't get read any more attentively than ones that are less shared. And this was their quote. Put another way, measuring social sharing is great for understanding social sharing, but using it to understand which content is capturing more of someone's attention is going beyond what the data actually tells you. So the question I would start with is, how accurately are we really measuring attention, and where are we in this process of figuring out which are the key measurements, what's worth tracking and using? I guess so I'll throw that to the panel. How far along are we in understanding what we want to measure?
Everyone's looking at me, but I think for us, Kudos, as I said, is totally metric agnostic. What we're running this year is a deep data analysis of how people are using the site and what the impact of all those different activities are. So we're partnering with companies who are going to look at that analysis probably over a 1.5 year period of time. And at the end of that, I'll come back and give you more information, because right now it's not for me to make a judgment on that. And also I think different people will want different things from different metrics, which is why we provide a range and let people choose what they think will be useful for them.
Yeah, I'd like to answer. When we first started with Plum, we knew there was data exhaust. We had no idea what it would tell us, right? So when we first started, what we did was we gathered every piece of data we could possibly find, first manually, right, which was, me sitting in front of Google with looking and saying, oh, we got all this, and assembling every metric we could find about a particular article and a set of them. And then we automated it, thank God, to gather more data for larger sets. And the amount of data, when you look at every single data point, quickly becomes overwhelming and unwieldy, right? Because there's so much out there. So thank goodness my co-founder is a librarian and said, okay, Mike, how is an approach to categorize this and to build those categories of metrics? And that's really where it came out of, was the fact that they are different. And some of them are attention, the social media of the retweets. Bitly has some great data out there showing that decay of how quickly things do get retweeted. And it's, I tweet not a ton, but a fair amount, enough to know when I say something, often from the time I press the button of the tweet to getting my hands up to put it on the keyboard, my phone is buzzing that people are retweeting it, right? That's how quickly, it is almost unbelievably quick. So those metrics, you have to separate them out. And that's why, looking at things like if someone's taken the time to bookmark something, they've engaged with it way more than just having the HTML page load in their web browser or pressing retweet. So I think that's how we get around it, is starting to categorize this so you can look at things.
Yeah, no, so I think it's really early days in a lot of this to figure out what's worth doing on. So PLOS and Altmetric make some of their data publicly available, and I want to talk about usage as a thing. So in the top 10 most used PLOS articles, there are 2 articles about antidepressant medications. And I have a really hard time interpreting usage, because does this tell me these are the 2 best articles on antidepressants, or is it just really a lot of interest in antidepressants? And then you start getting into some of these other things. Altmetrics, 2 of their top 20 articles are about fad diets, which tend to capture public's eye. People tweet around all these things. Both of them in the top 10 have an article about Facebook. Altmetric has one about Sudoku. And then you start getting really weird. So sensation, attention metrics draw a lot of the sensational sort of does. So, the classic example is the third most read article in the history of PLOS journals is about a sexual practice among fruit bats. The number 5 is this totally cool article. These Japanese researchers kept a colony of fruit flies in complete darkness for over 50 years, which is awesome, but the take-home message from the study was, wow, evolution takes a long time and nothing happened. But the study hit the front page of Reddit, and so in a week it was downloaded 194,000 times. PDF was only downloaded 1,500 times. What does that tell you? So the question is, if we know things like this draw attention and we're going to start rewarding researchers for drawing attention, does this change the nature of research? Do people start saying, I'm going to do something that's sort of flashy and catchy rather than something that maybe is more meaningful?
I think the attention metrics are really, really short term. One of the things that I'm very interested in watching is what the Frontiers series are doing. I did some very early work with them. They're an open access publisher that was acquired by Nature last year, and they've always had a vision for creating an algorithm around not only how often something is being used, but how and by who, in what context. And I think that as we start getting more of that sophistication in, the popularity thing will go away. And popularity always has a place. But
Like some of the citation metrics, rather than the impact factors, the ones that look at where it was cited and put different weights on it, so you think that may be a future question for that. That's good. Social media, I want to talk about. I think there's a bit of an echo chamber in social media. I've always said the most common topic on science, written about in science blogs, is science blogging or other science bloggers or some combination of the two. So, if you look at the most shared in social media things, there's a lot of it's about social media itself. And I think that one of the questions I always think with social media is how much does it tell us about the interest in the article itself versus the how well networked. I think Linda mentioned, the how well networked you are has a huge influence on these sorts of things. I think of someone like Michael Eisner, who has 9,000 followers on Twitter. If he tweeted out a paper compared to someone like Jim Watson, who was the Nobel Prize winner who discovered the structure of DNA, he's got no Twitter account. Is Michael going to score better just because he's taken the time to build this network, not necessarily because his work is more important than the other? And how do we separate out this sort of, I'm popular and I have a lot of friends from I do good work?
Well, I think one of the things to consider, though, is those early career researchers, right, who are looking to get a footprint, to get known, to do that. So if you take the extreme, the Nobel Prize winner who doesn't need any, he doesn't tweet, that they're extreme cases. But you look at the climb their way up, junior researcher, do these tools, does this ability to measure help them or hurt them? I think on the whole it helps them. It helps them start to find out who to collaborate with, to find people who are interested in their work, to do all of that. So I think if you look at it just on the extreme, you're missing a lot of the value.
No, I think this sort of gets to my next question is we really do ask researchers to do a lot of self-promotion, but it's a means to an end. I mean, the more your paper is read, you're going to do work. You've got to publish it in the paper. You give a talk at a meeting. You do interviews with the newspaper. You want to raise awareness of the work, and hopefully that increases the work's impact. And I guess the worry here is, are we mistaking the means for the end? If we say, all right, we're going to get rid of the impact factor and we're going to use these alt-metric scores to give you funding, to give you career advancement, are we mistaking the tools for the end result? I think Andrea said in her talk that when you create a metric and you start measuring people by something, they will change their behavior to maximize their performance. So this is the question. Metrics have to line up with goals and the incentives. How do we want researchers spending their time? if I'm the Diabetes Foundation, do I want someone, really striving to find a cure for diabetes, or do I want them out networking and commenting on other people's papers and things like that all the time? I guess, where should we use this? Should we be offering rewards for doing the things that these metrics measure, or how do we separate the means from the ends?
My own experience is that science is really quite collaborative, and that people who are generally successful now are those that are good at growing the networks, talking about their work. Most people want to talk about their work. They've got new channels for doing that now. The idea that somehow we should be stopping them, or that's some false direction to give support in, seems odd to me. I mean, we've had the postal system, we've had email, now we've got these new channels. I can't wait for the word social media to go away. I think it's totally misleading. But there are many new environments in which we can support research communication. So why not support it?
Well, I don't think we necessarily need to make it go away, but is that, how much, of this sort of career reward funding do we want to base on that? It's this tricky question. Impact factor supposedly measures impact, and this person is a good researcher. This piece of research was important, and I think a lot of attention metrics are leading indicators for that importance, but they are not necessarily important themselves, I guess.
Yes.
And how we separate out the impact is what we really want to measure in the end, versus things that lead us to think this may be impactful.
I think I'm really interested to see what the funders do with this data, because ultimately everyone's going to dance to their tune. So what they decide is going to be important is going to drive things, not us. So I don't know if Andrea has any sort of insights to share.
Yeah, I also think categorizing all the metrics as attention metrics, I agree with you. If you're just looking at attention metrics, then I agree with many of the statements you're making. But I don't think what we're talking about here is just attention metrics.
Right, you mix in citations, for example.
Citations, or the captures of people are saving it. Like, that's not just, people are engaging with it. And looking at all of that together is when you start to be able to see, like we had a researcher, one of our very first that used the service, and I thought we had a bug, because looking at his profile, every single article he had one tweet, one Google Plus, one Facebook like, he's like one. Like, oh my gosh, what happened here? So looking at that, no, it was this poor chap who went in, every single thing he did, he went to every single channel, and he liked it all one time. Well, he also had his running log thing that automatically tweeted his workout schedule, all intermixed in that same social media channel. So every 100th thing was something about an article he had written, but everything else was noise. That not even his mother would want to subscribe to his feed. And so it's like there are these researchers who are going through a lot of effort to try to promote their work, and just the feedback loop was like, whoa, back up. You've got to change things a bit to make that work more effective. And tools like Kudos and the librarians who support the researchers, all of these things kind of help direct to a way that helps them not waste their time.
Yeah, no, I think they're really valuable tools, and I think maybe there's too much emphasis given to this notion of it's going to replace the impact factor, and this is how we're going to measure, do researcher assessment kind of thing. And I'll talk about it in a second. I don't want to keep people late. I'm going to skip over gaming because we've talked about it. Sort of a question for Mark. We're still left with this. We're looking for a qualitative answer. Metrics can really help us give us this better answer, this better idea of performance. But there still has to come human judgment, has to come into it somewhere. And I want to talk. Are there things that you would suggest we can use besides metrics? I mean, one of the things that to me still seems obvious. Let's throw out the impact factor, but we say we want to give someone credit for we want to evaluate their work. And isn't that the peer review process that a journal does? I mean, you know, a good editor is an expert in the field. They find 2 or 3 experts in the field. They read the paper in depth. They know the field. They slot it exactly where it should be in the field. You know, how well a journal does that, how high a standard they set for what they're willing to accept, you know, gives you journal reputation, journal brand. Can the reputation and brand of a journal play some role in the assessment process? Is that an indicator that's valuable?
Well, I think perhaps it can. I mean, I don't think there's ever going to not be a hierarchy of journals. But if you eliminate, you know, a single number that's the measurement for that hierarchy, I think you end up with a much more nuanced appreciation of what a given journal does well. I think people would be looking more at, you know, who's in the editorial board, who else publishes there. It's not just a number.
Yeah.
So
I think people really sort of have a hierarchy within their own field in their mind, much more so than the impact factor itself in some ways.
yeah, I don't think that would go away.
The other thing I want to throw out was this notion of the NIH biosketch. I went with that professor at Hopkins who had 500 applications. I said, oh, how do you narrow them down? And I said, do you look at papers? Do you look at impact factor? He said, no. We're a cancer institute. Everyone has to write this NIH biosketch, which contains this, basically this paragraph that says, who am I? What do I do? Why is it important? And you know, to say you have to read 500 papers by 500 applicants is too much, but he was willing to read 500 paragraphs. And all right, you have a paragraph here, convince me why your work is important, and I'll put you on my short stack, and then I'll dig into your work. And I think things like that may also provide the sort of triage that we're looking for. And I want to finish, you know, as I said, I think there's a little too much emphasis on, oh, this is going to replace the impact factor, we're going to make all our decisions based on these sorts of metrics. Because these things are so incredibly useful in so many other areas. So, you know, we talk about, you know, these are some I mentioned before. You're a grant officer. Well, you know, let me look at this person's career. Is this person worth funding? I want to look at, you know, how much of an influence they've had. Citation is useful for them, but not looking at impact factor of the journals that they publish in. I want to look at their papers, look at an article level. I'm a new researcher. There's too much to read. What do I read? I can go see what are people bookmarking on Mendeley. What are my colleagues reading in case, you know, so I don't miss anything. I'm a researcher. I work in climate science. You know, who else is talking about my work? Is someone taking my work and mischaracterizing it? I can use these sorts of metrics and tracking tools to see exactly what people are saying about me. You know, this is a reputation-based business. I need to protect my reputation. I'm at a university. You know, I work in the development office. I'm trying to bring in grants. I don't care about citations because researchers don't donate to the institution. I want to know what the public is interested in. What are people talking? What research in my institution is in the newspapers, on Twitter, things like that. Really valuable information. I work at a pharma company. I want to know who's talking about our new drug. You know, who's reading the article about it? Are they clinicians? Are they patients? Who am I reaching? Am I doing my job well? I'm a librarian. You know, what are the researchers talking about? I want to stay ahead of their needs. You know, maybe I can start acquiring a new journal or new books and things like that before they even know that they want it. So I think those to me are some really interesting use cases. I don't know if anybody wants to throw out anything else along those lines and different ways we can use these things, getting past just this simple idea of, you know, the entire world revolves around grant review and tenure committees.
Yeah, to me, the killer use case is being able to use these sorts of measures of impact to change how search engine relevancy ranking works out of the gate, you know, out of the box. So right now, if you go to Google Scholar or Summon that I worked on, or EDS now, you know, all of them might try to use citation counts to weight what's important, or they might use date, saying something more recent might be important in their relevancy ranking. Google Scholar uses citation counts, and because of that lagging effect, what you're going to get is if you do any kind of topical search in Google Scholar, like global warming, you're going to get all data that's 10 years old in your top results. So there's clearly more interesting stuff that researchers would want to have access to. That if we had this other way of weighting what is important, we might be able to get that. So if you're doing disease research, how are you getting that? And so I'm using, or in some cases in my past life, building the search tools that researchers use. And without these sorts of metrics, you cannot give good relevancy ranking. And to me, that's like what's exciting a couple of years from now is that.
That speed is a real thing that's offered here. That, I mean, a history paper citation peaks, after 5 years, 10 years. That's a long time after it was written.
Right, and so it's great if you're looking for the seminal articles, but often that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for what's impactful happening now.
I think so. I think there's a lot of interest in kudos. Just people want to be read. They want to share their information. I mean, that's people are getting into they get into research because they're curious and they want to share what they learn. And we can talk about funding and this and that, but there's a very human impulse to share information. I mean, that's why we're all here. That's why we're all publishers. That's our mission. That's what we're driven to do. And I think these tools can really help us do that better. So I remain skeptical, but I do understand that it's very early days, and I think there's a tremendous amount we can do with these that's going to provide a lot of value across the board for everyone. So I think we'll end it there. Thanks.